In terms of the advert, just to get that out of the way, Mizuho is one of the world's largest banks. You won't have heard of us. We are a corporate bank. We don't do retail outside of Japan. Our EMEA headquarters, as Tiffany just referenced, based here in London, we employ approximately 1,300 staff, and we service a range of corporate entities with corporate and investment banking services, as well as treasury activities across Europe and the Middle East. End of advert. And yes, we are Japanese. And I say that because it's well known that Japan is well down in the league tables in terms of gender and is still very male-dominated. However, despite that, you just heard about my successes and other women like me within Mizuho. However, with the leadership from Prime Minister Shinzo Abe and his wife, First Lady Aki Abe, where they focus on Abenomics, they are empowering and increasing women in managerial positions. I believe that Japan is on its way to finding the balance in respect of gender. And you will see a quote in terms of the N Committee from Aki Abe over on the corner there. She is a member of the N Committee, yes. And you can speak to that later, Tiffany. With regard to Mizuho Financial Group, in 2014, we appointed our first external chairperson, a female, to the board of directors, and there is a positive campaign to develop, support, and promote women. So please don't write off Japan. So why are Mizuho sponsoring Roundtable Global at the second Finding the Balance Summit? There are 3 reasons. First of all, we were really impressed, inspired, and humbled by the first summit and the feedback, especially by the young speakers that joined that conversation and their hopes for the future. We want to be part of that ongoing discussion with you. That leads on to the second point, understanding diversity and balance. That must start early. We want to raise aspirations of the next generation so that no child ever thinks a career is not for them because of their gender, race, or background. And we will hopefully stop having this debate in the future. And finally, financial services, including Mizuho, has a lot of work still to do with regard to having a balanced workforce at all levels and empowering women in today's world. Therefore, as a partner to today's Finding the Balance campaign, we look forward to the discussion and findings that will come from today. What, therefore, is balance for Mizuho? A workforce that is representative of the communities in which we operate and the clients we represent. The diversity and inclusion agenda is very broad, and I therefore make no apologies in saying that making progress on gender equality is our priority. But it is not at the exclusion of other underrepresented groups, but to act as a model and a catalyst for change across all groups. Before I explain how Mizuho is promoting the employment and advancement of women, Tiffany asked me about my view of balance. As a woman in her late 50s, I have seen many significant changes in the world around me. I remember colour TV. I remember mobile phones when they were a brick and you had to hold them to your ear. I remember getting my first PC at work and sending my first email. And many of you will be like that. I remember video recorders coming and going. Some of you may not even have heard of them. But what about gender? When I look at gender, my mother was my first role model. When I was 9, she went back to work full time, and that was very unusual in the late 1960s. All of my friends' mothers, they would stay at home. But what did that mean for me? It meant that my mother and my father could create balance. It actually meant that my mother could go out and be independent. She could buy her first sports car, and we were the first 2-car family in the road. Role models can come from any area. My mother she wasn't a high flyer. She worked as a PA in a typing pool, another term that you will not have heard perhaps today, but typing pool is where secretaries used to work on behalf of all the male bosses. But she wanted that independence. She went out and she created a special life for my family. I get emotional. Right, moving on. I started work at the London Hospital in Whitechapel, where I was surrounded by professional women in radiotherapy, physiotherapy, a few surgeons, but importantly, many of those women headed up the mainstay of the hospital. They headed up the administration. They made life and death decisions every day, and they too were inspirational. However, when I moved into the private sector, and especially finance, that is when I started to notice the lack of females in senior roles. After 30 years in the finance sector, what changes have I seen in relation to gender? The answer is very little. I am disappointed, as I did not expect that I would still be talking about gender and the business case for fairness, equality and inclusion at this stage in my career. I thought my generation would break the mould. On the basis of how the world and everything around us has significantly changed, I anticipated and talked about a completely different world in my 20s and 30s. With technology changes, I envisaged a bright new world. But the fact is that despite everything, despite legislation, best practice, role models, the gender mix, especially in financial services, and especially at senior levels, has hardly moved. 16 years ago, I was the only female executive within Mizuho, and that is still the case today. Perhaps I've failed. Why? What needs to happen? Fortunately for me, that question has been answered this week by Jane Ann Gadia of Virgin Money, who published a report on her review into the representation of women in senior management roles in the UK's financial sector industry. Analysis of data prior to the review highlighted that female progression from middle to senior levels of management is worse in financial services than in any other sector. The report and its recommendations are about fairness, equality, inclusion for men and for women, and that the achievement of a balanced workforce at all levels in financial services will undoubtedly improve the culture, behaviours, outcomes, profitability and productivity. And that was a quote. Importantly for Jane, when she looked at all of the evidence, what she found is that people weren't leaving financial services because of childcare, they were leaving because of the culture. Jane did not find a magic bullet. She didn't sort of say, this is what you do and this is how you will cure all ills. She notes that all organisations are different and have differing priorities. And she highlighted 10 positive actions. And I'm going to list them very quickly. She said we need to invest in supportive people managers. We need to create the right culture. We need to provide technology to support flexible working. We need transparent pay structures. We need to increase our role models. We need good, flexible working policies to support working parents, to offer mentoring schemes and provide opportunities for commercial experience. Additionally, and importantly for me and for Mizuho, she made statements that resonated with us and which we have discussed in our own boardroom. And I quote, "To see meaningful change in gender equality, businesses need to measure it because what gets measured gets done." Therefore, in achieving its vision of balance, Mizuho has taken and is planning its next positive steps to support gender diversity. When I say positive, this is not about favouritism, it is not about positive discrimination, but it's about equality for men and women and creating balance, which starts from the top with the tone and with influence, with our leaders and our men positively wanting to change the mix and create balance, and finally with women supporting and sponsoring others. Change will only happen if men are part of the conversation and the journey. It's about collaboration and it's about balance. The first step for us was executive accountability. In the bank, I have been assigned as that executive, accountable for improving diversity at all levels. The strategies which we are now discussing include establishing executive sponsors in the business, establishing our own internal targets against which we will report, and measuring all of our executives against those targets. Now that's quite interesting because in Jane's report, she talks about measuring people's bonus, those executives, on those achieving those diversity targets. And that is what we will have a discussion about in Mizuho. So what else is Mizuho doing against those 10 points that Jane mentioned? For Mizuho, we have approached this based on the 3 phases of the work lifestyle: the education and entry point, development and progression, and finally, seniority. As many of you will know, finding the balance is about creating, educating, and inspiring young people about the importance of balance and empowering them to courageously redefine how we exist. And I believe that's a quote from yourself, Tiffany. Understanding diversity must start early. Through the bank's work experience programme, which is led by Tim, we are focused on inspiring young people about the possibilities of the world of work. And as I said, no child should ever think that a career is not for them because of their gender, race, or background. We are taking action in our workplace so that more women will be ready for and reach senior positions. Mizuho has a successful and ongoing record of staff working flexibly and retaining a high number of women returning from maternity leave. Our next campaign is about attracting women returners generally, not just our own. This is important to us because we want every man and woman to feel they can have both a career and a home life, a work-life balance. In fact, within our executive, of a group of 13 men, 2 of them work flexibly, and the woman in the room doesn't. Finally, an overarching objective is to bring more women through to senior roles. To achieve this, we have in place development programs that aim to change attitudes, cultural approaches, including a women's leadership program, diversity, unconscious bias, a mentoring scheme, and a small but growing women's network group. As Tiffany says, we have been working with Shine, and going back to the point that men need to be part of the conversation, with Tiffany, Shine has become a mixed program. With Shine, we are not only developing our women, but also our men in terms of a journey of self-discovery and self-mastery. It enables them to understand and leverage their core strengths to become authentic leaders and role models that bring their whole selves to work and empower everyone around them to do the same. In summary, at Mizuho, we are committed to promoting the employment and advancement of women. As a partner with Roundtable in their Finding the Balance campaign, we are here to unlock the significant potential that each of you has, to offer in joining the global conversation about finding balance and empowering women in today's world. We look forward to the discussion and findings that will come from today's event. Thank you.